When Chip Hailstone finally returned home after serving time in prison, he walked back into a life that had been waiting for him all along. Yet, although the familiar land, the deep snow, the relentless hard work were unchanged, Chip himself was not the same man who had left. His children had grown older, more serious, and carried themselves with a new maturity. His wife Agnes had shouldered the enormous responsibility of keeping everything together in his absence, bearing the weight of both family and survival. Nothing about their life was simple. Nothing was ever handed to them. In this story, we will explore Chip Hailstone's remarkable journey, seen on Life Below Zero, and take you through the full summary of his life. So let's begin with the question, who really is Chip Hailstone? Chip Hailstone was not born in Alaska, though fate seemed to be calling him there long before he ever set foot in the Arctic. He entered the world in 1969 as Edward V. Hailstone in Kalispell, Montana, a quiet town framed by wide-open skies and rugged beauty. Life in Montana was simple, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, where a boy could spend endless days outdoors without much worry. From a young age, Chip was taught the basics of fishing and hunting. But for him, these were never just hobbies. They were lessons in understanding the land and respecting the world around him. His family instilled in him the values that would guide him for the rest of his life. Every animal taken had a purpose. Nothing should ever be wasted. And survival required hard work and responsibility. By the time Chip reached his teenage years, he had grown restless. The quiet rhythm of Montana life no longer satisfied his adventurous spirit. He began to dream of something larger, something wilder. In 1988, at just 19 years old, he packed up his belongings and traveled north to Alaska. What began as a youthful adventure soon turned into something much deeper. Alaska had a way of getting under his skin. The endless tundra, the biting cold, the vast skies pulled him in until he realized he wasn't just a visitor, he had found a new home. Though the land was unforgiving and survival came with a price, for Chip, this was exactly the challenge he was seeking. He eventually settled in Nurvik, a small Inupiat village about 20 miles east of Kotzebue. Here life moved to the rhythm of the seasons. People still lived much like their ancestors had, relying on hunting and fishing to provide for their families and depending on one another for survival. This was the life Chip had long imagined, one where every single day demanded effort, resilience, and respect for the land. In Nurvik, Chip met Agnes, a woman who knew the land in ways he was still learning too. Agnes was Inupiat, raised in the village, and deeply connected to the traditions passed down through her people for generations. She could read the weather and the shifting wind, track animals across snow, and teach her children the true meaning of belonging to their homeland. Chip and Agnes married and built a family together, raising 5 daughters, Tinmiak, Irektok, Mary, Caroline, and Cuten. Each of them grew up immersed in the lessons their parents lived by. Respect the land. Care for one another and never waste what you are given. Life in Nurvik was never easy. Winters were brutally long, with temperatures plunging well below zero for months on end. Food was not something you could simply buy, it was something you earned. That might mean tracking caribou across frozen tundra for hours, or cutting through thick ice to fish for a single catch. Every day carried real danger, from sudden storms to encounters with wild animals, to the constant threat of injury far from medical help. And yet the Hailstones endured, because the life they lived, as difficult as it was, gave them something no modern comfort could replace: freedom and purpose. These early years shaped Chip into the man viewers would later come to know on television. No longer just Edward from Montana, he became a man of the Arctic, capable of surviving in conditions where most people would not last even a single winter. When Life Below Zero premiered on National Geographic in 2013, it stood out immediately from other reality shows. This was not about glamour or staged drama. There were no producers stepping in to rescue participants if something went wrong. This was real life, captured in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The show introduced audiences to a small group of Alaskans, including Chip, Agnes, and their children, who were not just surviving but thriving in the Arctic wilderness. From the very first episodes, viewers could see that the Hailstones were unique. They weren't simply scraping by, they were living fully and passing down generations of knowledge. Chip often appeared teaching his daughters how to handle rifles safely, how to track animals across frozen tundra, and how to butcher meat so that nothing went to waste. Agnes, with her quiet strength and deep ties to her Inupiat heritage, reminded viewers that this was more than just survival. It was a cultural legacy, a way of life that had endured for thousands of years. Each episode opened a window into a world most people would never experience. There were no grocery stores nearby, no hospitals around the corner, and no quick way to call for help. Everything had to be hunted, trapped, or fished. Equipment repairs had to be made with whatever materials were on hand, since waiting weeks for parts could mean going without. Audiences watched as Chip set lines under thick ice for whitefish, built sleds to cross frozen rivers, and battled storms that would have sent most people running for shelter. The show never sugar-coated their lives. It showed the raw, biting cold, the numb fingers, and the long, dark months when the sun barely touched the horizon. Yet alongside the hardships, there were moments of deep reward, bringing home enough meat to last for months, children laughing on sled rides, and breathtaking landscapes that seemed almost unreal in their beauty. Fans quickly grew fond of Chip. He had a way of explaining his actions that made viewers feel like they were learning with him. He was serious when necessary, but balanced with humor, often laughing, joking with his daughters, and clearly enjoying teaching them. People admired his calmness under pressure. When a storm hit, a machine broke down, or a hunt failed, Chip didn't panic. He adapted and kept going. But admiration came with concern. Those familiar with the Arctic knew the dangers were constant. Every frozen river crossing, every hunting trip in sub-zero cold, carried real risk. Some viewers feared that one day tragedy might unfold on camera. Others worried that fame could bring unwanted attention, whether from strangers, government agencies, or critics who might misunderstand their way of life. Even the crew filming the show faced immense challenges. They trailed the Hailstones into storms, across ice, through mosquito-filled summers, often losing equipment to freezing conditions. Batteries would die, cameras would seize up, and sometimes shoots were delayed for days due to weather. Yet this dedication allowed viewers a rare, authentic look into life in Alaska, where nature always had the final say. Over the seasons, the Hailstones became central to the show's identity. Viewers tuned in not just to see Alaska's wilderness, but to witness how Chip and Agnes raised their family and faced each new challenge. The series became an education in subsistence living, teaching audiences about hunting traditions, resourcefulness, and Inupiat culture. Chip himself became more than a TV personality. He grew into a symbol of self-reliance. Fans respected his ability to raise capable daughters who could thrive in conditions most people wouldn't dare to face. But the warnings about their risks never faded. The same independence and closeness to the land that made them inspiring also made them vulnerable. By the time the show gained popularity, the Hailstones had become one of the most recognized families in Alaska, drawing admiration worldwide, but also criticism. Some questioned whether television exposure put them at greater risk. Others speculated whether constant filming might someday clash with hunting regulations or state authorities. And eventually, those concerns came true. As consequences began to catch up with Chip, in 2011, Chip's life took a sharp, unexpected turn. That summer, he reported to Alaska's state troopers that a local resident had physically assaulted one of his daughters. According to Chip, the man had raised a hand against her in violence, and Chip believed the threat was real. When he sought protection, Chip claimed the authorities dismissed his concerns. For a man who trusted instincts over institutions, this felt like betrayal. Matters escalated further when Chip accused one of the troopers of acting aggressively toward him during a separate incident. He believed the officer had threatened him unfairly. Chip insisted he was only defending his family and telling the truth. But his accusations triggered a legal battle that spiraled beyond his control. By December 2012, prosecutors charged him with making false statements to police and perjury. In simple terms, they accused him of lying under oath about both the assault on his daughter and the trooper's behavior. Authorities argued that there was no solid evidence to support his claims, and therefore he had knowingly misled the court. By July 2013, the case went to trial. For days, Chip faced the stress of defending himself against charges that threatened his freedom and reputation. For viewers who only knew him as a resilient father and survivalist, it was shocking to see his life collide with the justice system in such a dramatic way. He was a man who had spent most of his adult life far from the noise of cities and the formality of courtrooms. His world was the wilderness, open spaces, rivers, and hunting grounds, not judges, lawyers, and juries. Yet now, he found himself forced into that very system, standing before a judge and jury to defend his name and his actions. Witnesses were called, evidence was laid out, and both sides presented their arguments with intensity. Through it all, Chip insisted he had spoken the truth. He explained that what he said had truly happened, and that his only motive had been the safety of his family. But despite his defense, the court did not rule in his favor. The jury ultimately found him guilty to counts of perjury, 2 counts of providing false information to officers, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. The sentencing came later that year, and it hit him hard. The court declared that Chip Hailstone would serve 15 months in jail. Hoping to overturn the decision, he filed an appeal, determined to clear his name and avoid serving time. But in 2017, the Alaska Court of Appeals upheld the conviction. At that point, Chip had no choice but to face the reality of imprisonment. For a man whose life had always been tied to freedom and the ability to roam the wilderness, the idea of spending over a year behind bars was devastating. When the time finally came, Chip was taken into custody and sent to the Anchorage Correctional Complex. The transition was brutal, like being thrown from one world into another. Gone were the wide-open landscapes, the smell of fresh air, and the comforting presence of his family. In their place were locked doors, rigid routines, and unchanging concrete walls. At first, he struggled deeply to adjust. Yet over time, he found small ways to keep his mind strong, to occupy his thoughts, and to hold on to his resilience. For more than a year, his family had to carry on without him. His wife Agnes stepped into the role of main provider, hunting, trapping, and teaching the children how to survive while he was gone. Life Below Zero continued filming, and audiences witnessed how the family endured Chip's absence. Viewers were stunned to see him missing from episodes, and only later realized that he was serving time in prison. Many were moved, watching Agnes venture out on hunts alone, guiding her children, setting traps, and keeping the homestead alive. It was inspiring but also heartbreaking for fans who had followed their journey for years. This time was not only a test of survival in the wilderness, it was a test of emotional strength. Chip's children had to grow up faster, taking on heavier responsibilities while waiting for their father's return. Later in interviews, Chip admitted that the hardest part of prison was the knowledge that he couldn't be there for his family, especially through harsh winters when every hand mattered. In August 2018, after completing his sentence, Chip was released. His return to Norvik was powerful, almost overwhelming. Cameras captured his homecoming, the relief on Agnes's face, the joy of his children, and the raw emotions that came with reunion. For Chip, freedom felt different now. He had faced the justice system, paid the price, and was determined to move forward. Still, the experience left its mark. He confessed that being locked away gave him a new perspective, to value time, to treasure family, and to cherish even the smallest moments of freedom. This chapter of his life became one of the most defining moments in the Life Below Zero story. It was no longer just about survival in the Alaskan wilderness. It was about surviving personal trials, losing everything for a time, and then coming back stronger. Even after his release, Chip rarely spoke in detail about the case. Instead, he focused on the future, rebuilding trust with his family and teaching his children how to thrive off the land once more. Fans, however, never forgot. Some believed Chip had been wrongly convicted and was simply trying to protect his family. Others felt that the law had run its course and that Chip had crossed a line. The debate about his case still lingers, often resurfacing in conversations. About the show and the challenges remote communities Faced with the justice system, the day Chip walked back into Norvik after 15 months in, prison was ordinary on the surface, but enormous in meaning. The snow cut sharply against his skin, the sun barely touched the horizon, and the village looked unchanged. Yet for Chip, nothing felt the same. Walking down the path from the landing strip to his home, he realized what he had missed: not just the wilderness or frozen rivers, but the simple rhythms of family life. The air smelled of snow and wood smoke, grounding and familiar. Agnes waited for him in her fur-lined clothing. Children gathered close. His daughters ran first, squealing and throwing themselves into his arms. For a moment, all his worries, all the courtrooms and locked cells, melted away. The reunion was messy, loud, and beautiful. His children clung to him, pulling at his coat, peppering him with questions. Agnes watched with relief, the quiet strength she had carried finally softening as she let him reclaim his role. Chip knelt, hugging his younger children, feeling the weight of all he had missed: birthdays, hunts, storms, and countless quiet nights by the fire. It struck him like a blow. Life had gone on without him. The first weeks back were filled with catching up and relearning the household's rhythm. Agnes had run everything in his absence, making decisions, leading hunts, repairing sleds, and teaching the kids. Chip observed quietly at first, noticing the changes and improvements she had made. Slowly, he began to take part again, starting with small tasks like repairing traps and nets. He resumed teaching his children, reminding them of old ways, showing them new skills. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they grew impatient, but always they listened. They knew their father had endured harsh trials and respected his lessons. During this period, life below zero carried a special weight. The footage showed not just survival, but a family healing. Every chore, every hunt, every laugh or moment of frustration revealed the raw human struggle of rebuilding. The children, pushed to grow during Chip's absence, now moved with more purpose. Chip and Agnes guided them carefully, sometimes chuckling, sometimes groaning, but always united. Their rhythm was imperfect, but it was alive. The first caribou hunt after his return was both chaotic and beautiful. It had been years since the family hunted together, and every step felt significant. The children carried nervous energy, eager to prove themselves. They stumbled, whispered arguments, and tripped over sleds, while Chip and Agnes guided them patiently. For Chip, it was more than a hunt. It was a sign that his family was rediscovering how to function as one in the weeks that followed. Chip repaired sleds, checked traps, and prepared weapons, while Agnes organized the home and taught the children. Nights were long and dark, with the family gathered around the fire, sometimes laughing until it hurt, sometimes shedding quiet tears. These were the moments when Chip understood most deeply that survival was not just about hunting or building. It was about connection, patience, and love. Fans reacted passionately when Chip returned. Some celebrated, others debated, but Chip himself remained quiet. He let his actions, working, repairing, hunting, teaching, speak louder than words. His children, more mature now, took on responsibilities with new awareness. Every lesson he taught about weather, animal tracks, or snow was more than survival. It was about preparing them for a world where mistakes could mean danger. Life in Norvik never stopped being harsh. Nets tore, storms destroyed plans, traps failed. Yet the family endured frustrations, laughter, small victories, and all. By 2020, they had rebuilt their rhythm. Chip led hunts, Agnes managed the household, and the children became full participants. Together, they embodied resilience, patience, and strength. For the Hailstones, survival was never only about physical endurance. It was about love, trust, observation, and determination. Through hardships, separation, and reunion, they showed the world that family is not just a word. It is a force that holds everything together, even in the harshest conditions.